The small shuttle shook violently. 10-year-old Nari grabbed the edges of her seat, her four-fingered hands turning pale blue with fear. Her large, almond-shaped eyes, with pupils like black diamonds, widened as the ship dropped suddenly. "Hold tight," her father shouted from the pilot's seat. His voice was steady, but Nari could sense his fear. Her mother worked quickly at the communication panel. "Mayday, mayday. This is Veshi Diplomatic Vessel 247. We are caught in crossfire between human and Drex forces. We are neutral. Repeat, we are neutral diplomats." Only static answered her calls. Another explosion rocked the shuttle. Through the viewport, Nari saw bright flashes of weapons fire. Large ships battled above the moon they had been approaching, a place where her parents were supposed to help make peace. Engine failing, the ship's computer announced in its flat voice, "Prepare for emergency landing." Nari's mother moved back to hold her daughter's hand. "It will be okay," she said softly, touching her forehead to Nari's. "Remember your training. If anything happens." The shuttle spun suddenly, throwing her mother forward. A horrible screeching sound filled Nari's ears as the ship tore through the moon's thin atmosphere. Her father fought with the controls, trying to level their descent. "Aim for the flat ground," her mother shouted, pulling herself back to the co-pilot's seat. Nari closed her eyes tight. She counted in her head like her teacher had taught her when she felt scared. 1, 2, 3. She reached 20 when the ship slammed into the ground. The terrible noise of metal breaking and scraping drowned out her scream. Her safety harness cut into her shoulders as she was thrown forward, then back. Something heavy and sharp hit her leg. The pain was instant and fierce. Then everything was quiet except for the hiss of broken pipes and the soft beep of emergency systems. "Mother, father," Nari called out. Her voice sounded small in the broken ship. No one answered. She tried to move but cried out when pain shot through her right leg. Looking down, she saw a piece of the ship's interior wall had fallen, pinning her leg. Blood, deep blue against her light purple skin, soaked through her traveling clothes. "Help," she called, louder this time. "Father, please help." When no answer came, Nari forced herself to look toward the front of the shuttle. What she saw made her stomach turn cold. Her parents lay still in their seats, too still. Her father was slumped over the controls. Her mother's head rested at a strange angle. Neither of them moved, even when Nari called again and again until her voice grew hoarse. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Among her people, tears were precious. Veshi did not cry easily, but now she couldn't stop them. Night began to fall outside the broken shuttle. Through a crack in the hull, Nari could see strange stars, not the ones she knew from home. The air grew cold. Strange sounds came from outside, low howls and scraping noises. Nari tried again to free her leg, but the pain made her dizzy. She reached for the emergency kit in the wall compartment, but it was just beyond her fingers. The ship's emergency beacon light blinked weakly near the door. At least that was working. But who would find her here? This moon was a border zone, fought over by humans and the Drex. Her people, the Veshi, tried to stay neutral in the conflict. Hours passed. Nari drifted in and out of sleep, waking each time to the same nightmare. Her leg throbbed. She was thirsty. And she was alone. Truly alone for the first time in her life. As the second night approached, Nari held her small family hologram tight in her hand. The tiny three-dimensional image showed her parents smiling, with Nari between them at her school ceremony last year. "Please," she whispered to the empty ship and the uncaring stars beyond. "Please find me." But as darkness fell completely, Nari began to believe no one ever would. Staff Sergeant Tog Kim moved quietly across the rocky ground. The moon's thin air made breathing harder, but his suit helped. 6 years in the Human Defense Force had taught him how to move in many strange places. "Any signs of Drex?" he asked into his helmet radio. "Negative," came the voice of Private Han. "Area looks clear." Tai checked his scanner again. His 5-person team had been sent to sweep this area after the battle. The Drex forces had been pushed back, but stragglers might remain. More importantly, they needed to check for any ships that had been shot down. Captain June's voice crackled through the radio. Remember, Command wants all crash sites documented. Especially look for any Veshi vessels. They're supposed to be neutral, but 3 of their ships were reported in the area during the fight. Understood, Tai replied. The Veshi were peaceful people who tried to stay out of the war between humans and the Drex coalition. If any Veshi had been hurt in the crossfire, it could damage the fragile alliance humans were building with them. Tai's scanner beeped softly. A faint signal appeared on the screen. Captain, I'm picking up a distress beacon about 2 kilometers northwest, he reported. Can you identify? Captain June asked. Tai adjusted his scanner. Signal pattern matches Veshi emergency protocols. It's weak though. There was a pause before the captain responded. Take Min and check it out. The rest of us will continue the sweep. Report what you find. Yes, sir, Ta said. He signaled to Private Min, and they changed direction toward the signal. The landscape was harsh, all rocks and dust, with low, twisted plants growing in patches. The moon's small sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground. Soon it would be fully dark. They had gone about 1 kilometer when Min's scanner gave a warning beep. Movement ahead, Min whispered. Multiple signals. Heat signatures matched Drex armor. Tai crouched behind a large rock and peered around it. In the dimming light, he could make out 5 Drex soldiers moving between the rocks ahead. They were heading in the same direction as the distress signal. Captain, we have Drex forces between us and the beacon, Tai reported. 5 of them. Looks like a scout patrol. Hold position, Captain June ordered. We'll come to you. Do not engage. But even as the captain spoke, a shot whizzed past Ta's helmet. The Drex had spotted them. We're under fire, Ta shouted, pulling Min behind cover. He fired back, hitting one of the Drex soldiers. The radio crackled with Captain June's voice. Moving to your position. Hold on. What happened next was chaos. More Drex appeared from behind rocks. The sound of weapons fire echoed across the barren landscape. Min was hit in the arm, but kept fighting. Ta saw 2 Drex fall to his shots. Fall back to position Alpha, Captain June ordered through the radio. We're outnumbered. Tai and Min began moving back, firing as they went, but a blast hit the ground between them, throwing them in different directions. Tai rolled behind a large boulder as dust and rocks rained down. When the dust cleared, Tai couldn't see Min or hear the rest of his team on the radio. The blast had damaged his communication system. He could receive broken pieces of messages, but couldn't send any. Regroup at extraction point, came Captain June's broken voice. Too many Drex. Tai checked his scanner. The Drex were moving away, probably chasing after the rest of his team. But the Veshi distress signal still blinked on his screen. It was closer now, maybe only half a kilometer away. He had orders to regroup, but someone was in that crashed ship, someone who might not survive the night. Tai made his decision. He would check the signal first, then find his team. Keeping low and moving carefully from rock to rock, he headed toward the distress beacon. The moon's strange stars came out, lighting his way as he approached what might be his most important mission yet. Neri woke to the sound of rocks shifting outside the crashed shuttle. She froze, holding her breath. 3 days had passed since the crash. 3 days alone with no food and almost no water. The pain in her leg had turned to a dull, constant ache. Something was moving toward the ship. Nari had heard the sounds of fighting earlier, the sharp crack of weapons fire, the low boom of explosions in the distance. She knew what that meant. Either the humans or the Drex were nearby. Her parents had told her about both. The Drex were feared across the galaxy. Tall, armored beings who wanted to rule everything they saw. Humans were newer to space travel, but they fought back against the Drex. Her people, the Veshi, tried to stay neutral and make peace. But peace seemed very far away now. The sounds came closer. Heavy footsteps crunched on the rocky ground outside. Nari pulled herself deeper into the shadow of the fallen wall panel, ignoring the sharp pain in her leg. Maybe if she stayed very quiet, whatever was out there would go away. The shuttle door, hanging half open since the crash, creaked as something pushed it wider. Nari covered her mouth with her hand to stay silent. Through the gap, she could see the moon's strange stars and a dark shape blocking them. A light beam cut through the darkness inside the shuttle, moving slowly across the broken interior. It passed over her parents' still forms at the front, then moved toward where Nari hid. She closed her eyes tight as the light found her face. "Hello there," a voice said softly. The words came first in a language Nari didn't know, then were repeated in basic trade language that she understood. Nari opened her eyes. The light had lowered so it wasn't shining directly at her anymore. She could now see who held it, a tall figure in bulky armor. Not Drek's armor, which was all sharp angles and red lights. This was smoother, with a clear face shield. A human. The human soldier knelt down, still keeping some distance between them. Slowly, he reached up and did something to his helmet. With a soft hiss, the front part lifted away, revealing his face. He had skinned the color of the sand on Nari's home world and dark eyes that looked at her with concern. His black hair was cut very short. "My name is Tai," he said, the translator in his suit converting his words. "I'm not going to hurt you. I picked up your ship's distress signal." Nari didn't answer. Her parents had taught her to be careful with strangers, even if they seemed nice. The human, Ta, seemed to understand her fear. He stayed where he was and placed his weapon on the ground beside him. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Nari hesitated, then nodded slightly, looking down at her trapped leg. Todd followed her gaze and frowned. "That looks painful. I have medical supplies that can help. May I come closer to check your injury?" Still, Nari didn't speak. Tears began to form in her eyes again, as the hope of rescue mixed with fear of this armed stranger. "I understand you're scared," Ta said. His voice was gentle. "Are your parents?" He glanced toward the front of the shuttle, then back to Nari. The look on his face told her he already knew the answer. "They joined the stars," Nari whispered, using a Veshi saying for those who had died. Ta nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What's your name?" "Nari," she said, her voice barely audible. "Nari," Tay repeated. "That's a nice name. It sounds a little like names from my home planet." He smiled slightly. "I'm from Earth. Have you heard of it?" Nari nodded. "My teacher showed us pictures. It has big waters called oceans." "That's right," Ta said, seeming pleased. He moved a little closer, slowly. "Nari, I want to help you. Your leg needs medical attention. And it's not safe here. There are Drek's soldiers in the area." At the mention of Drek's, Nari's eyes widened with fear. "Don't worry," Tai assured her quickly. "I'll protect you. But I need to get you out of here. Do you think you can trust me?" Nari looked at Ta's face for a long moment. Then, very slowly, she nodded. "Good," Ta said with a smile. "Now, let's see about getting you free." Ta examined the metal panel pinning Nari's leg. It was heavy, but he could lift it. The real problem was her injury. The wound had started to show signs of infection. The skin around it had turned a darker purple. "This might hurt," he warned, pulling a small medical kit from his belt. "But it will clean your wound and help with the pain." Nari nodded bravely. She flinched when Tay sprayed the medicine on her leg, but didn't cry out. "You're very brave," Ta said. "Now, I need to move this panel. When I lift it, try to pull your leg out. Ready?" He counted to 3, then lifted the heavy metal. Nari quickly pulled her injured leg free. She bit her lip hard to keep from screaming. Ta gently wrapped her leg with a bandage from his kit. "The bleeding has mostly stopped." "That's good. But we need to get you to a proper doctor soon." As he worked, his radio suddenly crackled to life. "Kim, do you copy? This is Captain June. Report your status. Over. Todd pressed a button on his wrist. This is Staff Sergeant Kim. I've reached the crash site. It's a Veshi diplomatic shuttle. He glanced at Nari, then lowered his voice. 2 adult casualties. I found 1 survivor, a child. There was a long pause before Captain June replied. Understood. What's the child's condition? Injured but stable. Leg wound, possibly infected. She needs medical attention. Copy that. But we have a situation, Sergeant. Drex forces are regrouping. Our extraction point is 30 kilometers northeast of your position. We cannot divert for pickup. Ta frowned. Sir, request permission to bring the survivor to extraction. Another pause. Negative. The risk is too high. The Veshi embassy will be notified. They can send a rescue team once the area is secure. Ta looked at Nari, who was watching him with wide, frightened eyes. She couldn't understand his language, but she could sense the tension in his voice. How long until the area is secure? Tai asked. Unknown. Could be days, maybe weeks. Captain June's voice softened slightly. Look, Kim, I understand how you feel, but we can't risk the mission for 1 civilian. Our orders are clear. Ta stood up and walked a few steps away, keeping his voice low. With all due respect, sir, she won't survive days. The shuttle systems are failing. No food, limited water, and her wound is infected. I'm sorry, Sergeant. Our hands are tied. Mark the location and move to extraction. We'll lift off at 600 tomorrow. That's an order. Todd looked back at Nari. She had pulled herself up to sit against the wall. Her small hands clutched a family hologram. She looked so small, so lost. He made his decision. Captain, I hear you, but I'm bringing her with me. Sergeant Kim. Captain June's voice rose. You are directly disobeying an order. The terrain is hostile. There are Drex patrols between you and extraction. You cannot make it carrying an injured child. I can. And I will. Taz's voice was firm. If you need to leave without me, I understand. But I'm not leaving her here to die. The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Captain June spoke again, his voice tight with frustration. You have until 600. If you're not at extraction by then, we have to leave. That's the best I can do. Understood, sir. Thank you. Tay turned back to Nari and knelt beside her. We need to go, he said, his translator converting his words. Go where? Nari asked, her voice small. To my ship. It's far away, and the journey won't be easy. But I'll carry you. What about? Nari glanced toward the front of the shuttle, where her parents lay. Tai understood. He bowed his head respectfully toward the bodies. We can't take them with us, but we will tell your people where to find them. Tears filled Nari's eyes. They would want me to be safe. Ta nodded. Yes, they would. He reached out his hand. We need to leave now. Do you trust me? Nari hesitated, then put her small 4-fingered hand in his. Yes. Good, Ta said, smiling gently. Because we have a long journey ahead of us. Ta worked quickly to prepare for their journey. He took water and an emergency blanket from the shuttle supplies. Then he adjusted his backpack, moving items to make space. I'm going to carry you, he told Nari. Your leg needs time to heal. Nari looked at Ta with doubt in her large eyes. But I am too heavy. Ta smiled. Actually, your people weigh less than humans. You'll be like a backpack. He pointed to his back. I'll carry you here. Using straps from his gear, Tai made a simple carrier. He helped Nari onto his back, making sure her injured leg was supported. Are you comfortable? He asked. Yes, Nari said softly. She was warm against his back. The feeling reminded Tai of carrying his little sister, Sue, when she was tired from walking. Before leaving, Tai went to the front of the shuttle. He bowed his head for a moment near Nari's parents. Then he took their ID cards from a compartment. These will help identify them. he explained to Nari, "so your people can find them later." Nari nodded, her chin moving against his shoulder. "Thank you." The night air was cold when they left the shuttle. Strange stars lit their way across the rocky ground. Ta checked his compass and started walking northeast. "It's 30 kilometers to where my team will meet us," he said. "That's a long walk. We'll need to be careful and rest sometimes." Neri was quiet for a while as they moved across the empty landscape. Then, in a small voice, she asked, "Why did you come back for me? Your leader told you not to." Tai thought about this. "Because it was the right thing to do. On my world, we don't leave children alone in danger." "What is your world like?" Nari asked. "Earth. It's beautiful," Ta said, stepping carefully over some rocks. "There are big oceans, tall mountains, and forests full of trees. My home is near the ocean. When this war is over, I'll go back there." "Will I go home too?" Nari asked. Ta nodded. "Yes, we'll get you to your people. They'll help you find your family." "But my family?" Nari's voice broke. "Do you have other family? Grandparents, aunts or uncles?" Tai asked gently. "My mother's sister," Nari said after thinking. "She works at the Veshi embassy on the human space station." "Good. That's where we'll take you," Ta said, trying to sound confident. They walked in silence for a while. The only sounds were Ta's boots on the rocky ground and their breathing in the thin air. After an hour, Ta stopped near a large rock that would hide them from view. "Let's rest a bit. Are you thirsty?" He helped Nari down and gave her some water. Her leg looked better, but she still couldn't walk on it. "My grandmother used to say that when people die, they join the stars," Ta said, looking up at the night sky. "They become part of the universe again." Nari followed his gaze upward. "We say something similar. We call it returning to the cosmic dance." "I like that," Ta said with a small smile. Nari looked at him with serious eyes. "Will I join the stars too?" The question hit Ta hard. This child had been through so much. She had seen her parents die. She had waited alone for days, thinking she would die too. He knelt down so they were eye to eye. "Not today," he said firmly. "Not for a very long time. I promise." Nari studied his face, then nodded slowly. "Now let's keep moving," Ta said, helping her back onto his back. "We have a long way to go." As they started walking again, Ta noticed flashes of light in the distance. He knew what they were: weapons fire. Drex patrols were out there, between them and safety. But Nari didn't need to know that yet. For now, he would let her rest against his back as he carried her through the night. "Tell me more about Earth's oceans," she said sleepily, her head resting on his shoulder. So Ta talked about the blue waters of home as he walked under alien stars, one careful step at a time. The sun rose slowly over the rocky landscape. Ta had walked through most of the night, stopping only for short rests. Now he needed to find shelter. Traveling during daylight was too dangerous with Drex patrols in the area. He found a small cave formed by fallen rocks. "We'll rest here until night," he told Nari as he gently set her down. Nari looked paler than before. Her purple skin had a grayish tone that worried Ta. When he checked her leg, he saw the wound looked worse. The infection was spreading. "Does it hurt badly?" he asked. Nari nodded, her eyes tight with pain. "It burns." Ta frowned. He had used all his medical supplies on her leg yesterday. What he needed was his team's medic and the proper antibiotics. "Try to sleep," he said, helping her lie down on the softest spot he could find. He covered her with the emergency blanket. While Nari slept, Tai checked his map. They had covered about 10 kilometers, 20 more to go. At this rate, they wouldn't make it to the extraction point by morning. Nari woke a few hours later. Her breathing was faster than normal, and her skin felt hot when Tai touched her forehead. "You have a fever," he said. "The infection is getting worse." He gave her water, but she could only take small sips. Ta felt helpless. Then he remembered something in his emergency kit, a universal antibiotic shot. It was meant for humans, and giving it to a Veshi might be risky. But doing nothing was riskier. "Nari," he said gently, "I have medicine that might help, but it's made for humans, not Veshi. I don't know if it will work for you, or if it might make you sick." Nari looked at him with trust in her eyes. "I will try it." Tay took a deep breath and gave her the shot. He watched her carefully for any bad reaction. After a while, her breathing seemed calmer, and she fell asleep again. While she slept, Ty tried his radio again. It still wasn't working right. He could hear bits of messages but couldn't send any. He heard Captain June's voice once, sounding worried. When evening came, Nari woke up feeling a little better. The antibiotic seemed to be working. "We need to move soon," Ta said. "Are you feeling strong enough?" Nari nodded, but Tai could see she was still weak. He helped her onto his back again, and they set out into the darkness. As they walked, Tai told Nari stories to keep her mind off the pain. "My sister, Sue, is about your age," he said. "She loves the ocean too. She collects shells from the beach near our home." "What is a shell?" Nari asked sleepily. "It's a hard, pretty thing that some sea animals live in. When they die, the shells wash up on the shore." Ta smiled at the memory. "Sue has boxes of them in her room. I would like to see them someday," Nari said. "Maybe you will," Tai replied. After a while, Nari asked, "Why did you become a soldier?" Tai thought about this. "To protect people, and to take care of Sue. Our parents died when she was small. The military paid for her school." "You miss her," Nari said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, very much." They were quiet for a while. Then Nari said softly, "In my language, we have a word. Hazel. It means guardian star." "Hazel," Tai repeated, trying to get the sound right. "Yes, in old stories, guardian stars watch over lost travelers, helping them find their way home." Nari's small hand touched his shoulder. "You are Hazel." Tada felt something warm spread through his chest. This child from another world, who had lost everything, was giving him a gift. A new way to think about himself and what he was doing. "Thank you," he said simply. As they moved through the alien night, Tay realized something important had happened. He had come to find a survivor, but in some way, this small, brave child was helping him survive too. Together, they walked on under the stars, their unlikely bond growing with each step. By the second night, they had traveled another 8 kilometers. Tai checked his map. They were now 12 kilometers from the extraction point. The deadline was approaching fast. "We need to move quicker," he told Nari. The antibiotics had helped her fever, but she was still weak. The moon's terrain became rougher as they moved. Large rocks and deep cracks made walking harder. Tai had to choose his path carefully. Suddenly, he stopped. His scanner was beeping softly. "What is it?" Nari whispered. "Someone's nearby," Ta said quietly. He gently set Nari down and pulled his weapon. "Stay very still." He peeked over a large rock. In the distance, he saw movement, the shape of a Drex scout moving between the rocks. Just one, from what he could see. The scout was heading in their direction. Tai turned back to Nari. "We need to hide. Now." He spotted a small cave opening nearby. Quickly, he helped Nari into the narrow space. "Stay here. Don't make any sound." "Where are you going?" Nari asked, her eyes wide with fear. "I need to make sure the Drex doesn't find us." "I'll come back for you." Nari grabbed his hand. "Promise. Promise." Ta squeezed her small hand. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. "This is a beacon. If I'm not back in 2 hours, press this button. It will send a signal to my team." Nari took the device carefully. "But you said that might bring the Drex too." "It might, but my team will come faster." Ta smiled at her. "Use it only if I don't come back." Before leaving, Neri reached for her pocket and pulled out the small family hologram. She pressed it into Ta's hand. "For luck," she said. Ta nodded, touched by the gesture. He put the hologram in his chest pocket, close to his heart. Then he slipped out of the cave. Moving silently, Ta circled around to get behind the Drex scout. He needed to stop the scout without making noise. A gunshot would bring others. The Drex was tall, with heavy armor and a helmet that covered its face. It moved slowly, scanning the area with a device similar to Ta's. Ta waited until the scout passed by his hiding spot. Then he moved quickly, striking the Drex from behind. The scout was strong, but Ta had surprise on his side. After a short struggle, the Drex lay still. Ta checked the scout's equipment. The worst thing he found was a small transmitter. The scout had already sent a message. More Drex would be coming. He hurried back toward Neri's hiding place. But before he reached it, he heard the sound of engines. Looking up, he saw a Drex shuttle land about a kilometer away. 6 Drex soldiers climbed out. They were searching, and they were between Ta and Neri. Ta knew he had to draw them away from where Neri was hiding. Moving to a spot in the opposite direction, he fired his weapon into the air. The Drex immediately turned toward the sound. Just as Ta hoped, they began moving toward him, away from Neri. He retreated further, firing occasionally to keep their attention. His plan was working. The Drex followed him into a narrow canyon, where the high walls would limit their movement. Here, Tai took his stand. The canyon walls protected his back and sides. The Drex would have to come at him from the front, where he could see them. The fight was short but fierce. Ta's training and the narrow space helped him. One by one, the Drex fell to his shots, but the last one got close enough to fire a plasma weapon. The shot hit Ta in his side. Hot pain spread through his body as he fell to one knee. With his last strength, he fired back. The final Drex dropped to the ground. Silence fell over the canyon. Ta pressed his hand against his wound. It was bad, but not immediately deadly. He could still move. Neri was waiting. He had promised to return. Forcing himself to his feet, Ta began the painful journey back to the cave where he had left her. The family hologram still rested in his pocket, next to his heart. For luck, each step was harder than the last. Todd pressed his hand against his side, trying to stop the bleeding. The plasma shot had burned through his armor. The wound wasn't deep, but it was painful. He had used his last medical supplies on it, but he needed real treatment soon. The cave where he had hidden Neri was still a kilometer away. Ty checked his watch. 1 hour had passed since he left her. She would be scared, maybe thinking he wasn't coming back. When he finally reached the cave, he called out softly, "Nari." "It's me, Ta." A small face appeared at the cave opening. "Ta." Nari's eyes widened when she saw his condition. "You're hurt." "I'll be okay," he said, trying to sound stronger than he felt. "The Drex won't bother us anymore." Nari crawled out of the cave. She looked at his side with concern. "You're bleeding." "I know, but we need to keep moving." Ta checked his map. "We still have 10 kilometers to go before dawn." The truth was harder. In his condition, carrying Nari, they would never reach the extraction point in time. But he didn't say this to her. Ta helped Nari onto his back again, biting his lip to hide the pain. Every step sent fire through his side, but he kept moving. After an hour, Ta knew they were in trouble. He had covered less than 2 kilometers. His pace was too slow. Even worse, his radio was completely dead now, damaged in the fight. He looked up at the stars. They seemed colder, more distant. Dawn would come in 4 hours. The extraction ship would leave without them if they weren't there. Then Tai saw something in the distance, a hill that rose above the surrounding rocks. It wasn't on his planned path, but it gave him an idea. "We're going to change direction," he told Nari. "But that's not the way to your ship," she said, confused. "No, but I have a new plan." Tai turned toward the hill. It was closer than the extraction point, maybe 5 kilometers away. If they could reach it, they might have a chance. The journey to the hill was the hardest thing Ty had ever done. Each step was pure will. The pain in his side grew worse. His vision blurred sometimes, but he kept going, one foot in front of the other. Neri seemed to understand not to talk. She rode silently on his back. Once she sang softly, a Veshi song that sounded like water flowing over stones. The gentle music helped Ta focus. When they finally reached the hill, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming. Ta carefully set Neri down near the top. "What now?" she asked. Ta pulled out parts from his damaged radio and his scanner. Then he took the weapons he had taken from the Drex. "I'm going to make a signal," he explained, "a big one that my team can't miss." Using the Drex power cells and parts from his equipment, Ta built a makeshift transmitter. It was something he had learned in survival training, how to boost a signal using enemy equipment. "This will send out a strong emergency beacon," he told Neri, "but it might also attract any Drex still in the area." Neri looked scared, but nodded bravely. "Do it." Ty activated the device. It hummed loudly as it sent out a powerful signal on the human emergency frequency. The bright dawn sky was starting to hurt Ta's eyes. The radiation from the moon's sun was dangerous during daylight hours. "We need to find shelter from the sun," Ta said. He spotted a small overhang nearby. "Let's wait there." Ta used his body to shield Neri from the growing sunlight as they moved to the shelter. Once there, he took off his protective jacket and wrapped it around her. "But you need this," Neri protested. "You need it more," Ta said. "The radiation would affect her smaller body faster. I'll be fine." That wasn't true. Without protection, the sun's radiation would make him sick within hours. But all that mattered was keeping Neri safe until help arrived, if it arrived at all. Tay sat at the edge of the shelter, his weapon ready. His vision was getting worse. The wound in his side throbbed with each heartbeat, but he would stay alert as long as possible. "They'll come," he told Neri, hoping it was true. "They'll come for us." The sun climbed higher in the alien sky. Tay's skin began to redden from the radiation. His head hurt and his mouth was dry. The wound in his side had stopped bleeding, but the pain remained. Neri watched him with worried eyes from beneath his protective jacket. "You should share this," she said for the third time. Ta shook his head. "I'm fine." It wasn't true, but it made her feel better. Hours passed. Ta drifted in and out of awareness. Sometimes he thought he was back home with Sue, walking on the beach. Other times he was nowhere at all, floating in darkness. Neri's voice brought him back. "Ta, I hear something." Ta forced his eyes open. The sound was faint at first, a low rumble that grew louder, the ship's engines. With effort, Ta pulled himself to his feet and looked up. A small shuttle was circling overhead. It had human military markings. "They found us," he whispered. The shuttle landed nearby, kicking up dust. Ta stood in front of Neri, his weapon ready. He needed to be sure it wasn't a trick. When the door opened, Captain June stepped out, followed by 2 soldiers with medical kits. "Kim," Captain June called. "Stand down, soldier. We're here to help." Ta lowered his weapon. Relief made his legs weak, and he fell to his knees. The medics rushed forward. One went to Neri while the other checked Ta's wounds. "You disobeyed orders," Captain Jun said, kneeling beside Ta. But there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "And you're the most stubborn soldier I've ever had." "You waited for us," Ta said weakly. Captain Jun nodded. "I delayed as long as I could. Then we picked up your signal." He looked at the makeshift transmitter. "Clever work." "The child," Ta began. "She'll be fine. We're taking you both to the medical frigate." The medics helped Ta and Neri into the shuttle. As they lifted off, Tai reached for his pocket. The family hologram was still there. He handed it back to Neri. "Thank you for the luck," he said softly. It worked. Neri took the hologram, but then reached for Ta's hand and held it tight. "Hazel," she whispered. 2 weeks later, Ta woke in a hospital bed. The room was bright and clean. His side was bandaged, but the pain was gone. "Good morning, Staff Sergeant Kim." Ta turned to see a Veshi woman standing by his bed. She wore the formal robes of a diplomat. Beside her stood Neri, her leg in a healing cast, but otherwise looking healthy. "I am Lena, Neri's aunt," the woman said. "I have come to thank you for saving my niece." Neri stepped forward. Her purple skin glowed with health, and her eyes were bright. "Ta, you're awake." Ta smiled. "Hello, Neri. You look much better. The doctors fixed my leg. They said you saved my life." Neri looked at him with admiration. "I told everyone how you carried me and fought the Drex and gave me your jacket." Lena stepped closer. "What you did has changed things between our peoples. The Veshi Council has requested your presence at a ceremony when you are well enough." "A ceremony?" Tai asked, confused. "Yes. Your actions have done more for human-Veshi relations than years of formal talks. You will be honored as a friend of the Veshi people." Ta shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Lena said firmly. "You did what few would have the courage to do." A nurse entered the room. "You have another visitor, Sergeant Kim." A young girl with black hair rushed in. "Brother." "Sue." Tai opened his arms as his little sister ran to him. "How are you here?" "Captain Jun arranged it," Sue explained. "He said you were a hero." Nari watched this reunion with interest. When Sue noticed her, Tai made introductions. "Sue, this is my friend Nari. Nari, this is my sister Sue." The two girls studied each other curiously. Then Sue smiled. "My brother told me you like oceans. I brought you something." She handed Nari a small shell. "It's from our beach." Nari took the shell with wonder. "Thank you." As the girls talked, Tai watched them with a full heart. This was why he had become a soldier, to protect, to help, to make the universe safer for children like Sue and Nari. Nari caught his eye and touched her hand to her heart in a Veshi gesture of respect and love. "Hazel," she said, smiling. "My guardian star did not let me join the stars too soon."